But this is basically going to be a episode / series where we basically eat delicious food and talk about cars, my two favorite things in the world.
Heck yeah.
So what are we eating today, Steffan?
Today we got Shake Shack, we
Lovely.
got some fries, we got some of that burger goodness.
Yes, I'm excited to try the new black truffle burger because I'm obsessed with truffle. I have a problem. So we'll see if that's any good. I've been seeing a lot of ads for it. And I tried to order it online earlier, but then their website doesn't work, so that's great.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That's the internet for you. Welcome to 2021.
Exactly.
It's the silicon shortage.
We got to, it's a silicon shortage.
That's why the app doesn't work.
So one of the things that we want to talk about today is the EV market right now, both from a, I guess, financial perspective, what it means for the automotive industry, but also from a car enthusiast perspective. We both absolutely love cars, but we also both love EVs as well. We're not one of those snobby car enthusiasts that, only want a V8 and a manual. And but I think there's a time and place for it. So I think we were talking about, you were talking about the silicon shortage. What are your thoughts on all that with, Tesla is behind on orders right now. They just upped the, I think, Model 3, Model Y prices just went up by about $5,000 actually, and they're pushing out delivery several months.
So it's actually super interesting. Tesla has been able to largely avoid getting hit by the silicon shortage in a time where everybody else's not their orders, but their supply is shrinking. Because they're using like legacy chips. I was actually reading about this, but they're using, I think it was like old 40 nanometer chips or some much larger number. But essentially their systems are such that they cannot adapt to the newer chips, and like TSMC and all these foundries only make so many of those old chips.
Okay. So
Tesla, meanwhile, whereas these other manufacturers are having trouble getting these big, giant chips that they're using for these systems, Tesla's rewriting their software on the fly to take advantage of basically like whatever chips they can get. So it's kind of interesting that they've been able to largely avoid getting hit too bad by the silicon shortage just by being creative and working around it.
Okay.
No, it's kind of wild in a time where everybody's trying to rush to get these EVs out to market because everyone wants to be competitive. You've got all these new cars rolling out right now, like the Mach-E. I think, does the Maverick have a plug-in hybrid?
Who?
The Maverick? The Ford Maverick? Because I think it has a plug-in version. I know they have a hybrid model that's being delayed right now.
I don't know if it's a plug-in hybrid. I do know the base model, that's like the $20,000 model, the $1999 that does like 40 miles per gallon. The base model is actually a hybrid.
Yeah.
So from stock, you get a hybrid. And you actually have to pay more to not have a hybrid, essentially, to get more power and whatnot.
That's wild.
But I wouldn't be surprised if they're like just because they can plug-in version. Like, why wouldn't you?
Oh yeah.
Right? If you're gonna brag about that 40 miles per gallon, and you have an efficient little city truck. I think the Maverick's really cool, by the way.
Honestly, it's a fantastic little truck. I've always recommended the Honda, the Ridgeline, to anybody who asks me about, hey, I need a truck.
Hear that, Travis? He recommends the Ridgeline.
To anybody who like needs a truck, but they're not like using it as a full-on work truck, the Ridgeline is the perfect truck. Because driving my dad has a 2011 Ram 1500. I drove that in Texas with gigantic parking spots and everything, and it was still a nightmare to park it and everything like that. And I've driven trucks.
Yeah.
But like a Ridgeline is perfect. It's that smaller truck, much easier to drive around, and I think the Maverick fits that same bill.
Yeah, I think a lot of people buy trucks because they think that they're contractors or they're off-roaders, and they're usually neither.
Yeah.
So the only advantage of a truck over like an SUV, because my dad hauls a lot of stuff now. He he does a lot of like home improvement stuff, and he uses our Sienna van because it's just much wider, or much longer bed than you would get in a truck technically, right?
Yeah, unless you get like a long extended bed.
But then you have a massive car, But the main advantage of the truck, right, is you can fit kind of like dirty things like a pile of crap outside, and you can just hose it down afterwards, right, without getting interior dirty. And I think to your point, the Ridgeline, and also things like the Super Baja, right, kind of fit that bill of being able to haul.
The Baja. I mean, you're not wrong, but just.
My friend Travis, who loves the Honda Ridgeline, who tells everyone to buy a Honda Ridgeline, also loves the Super Baja because he likes that kind of like, essentially it's an SUV with an exposed bed, so you can like clean it out if need be, so you don't get like your carpets dirty.
It's time to bring back the El Camino.
No, I want the Holden Ute.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, that type of thing. Which there is a company in Colorado, by the way, that will import them.
I was about to say.
But going back to EVs, I just it's just such an interesting time where like car manufacturers are now starting to realize, whether it be via regulations or they're looking at market demand, they're like, oh, we gotta actually start moving towards that direction. And so but then the problem arises when you try to think about, okay, well, Tesla has so much more time to develop these EVs, right? Which is why I think we were talking about the other day, if we were to buy EV, as much as we don't like a lot of aspects of Tesla ownership,
Sure,
whether it be the owners, the service aspect of it, the actual purchasing process of it, a lot of the whole process, that's still the EV to go, unfortunately, due to numbers, the supercharging network.
I think, truthfully, I think Tesla is the EV to go to if you don't have another car.
Okay.
If you have, just about any EV that's on the market today is usable as a daily driver. It's really just those long distance trips or trips where you're going to be away from the charging network, a traditional expected charging network, that becomes a challenge. But like for people who have a second car, oh, dude, you can drive anything.
Yep.
You can make an i3 work.
Yeah.
You can make a Nissan Leaf work.
Great car.
What is it? The Kia
Niro EV. Because there's 3 versions of it.
Yeah, like the charging network is irrelevant at that point, as long as you have that secondary car.
Yep.
But if you're gonna have an EV as your only option, I think it's incredibly foolish to consider anything but a Tesla.
Sure.
Especially now that they have like the CCS adapter. I don't know if that's out yet or if it's coming soon.
Do they have a CCS adapter?
They do. It just got announced again. I don't know if it's like on the market today.
Because that was the only challenge, is that if you want to fast charge on not a supercharger, you have to stick with CHAdeMO, which is actually going away. Most cars aren't using CHAdeMO. Most places are using that CCS standard, which is better. Than CHAdeMO, by the way. So.
CHAdeMO was fine. It was a good option.
No, but I like that CCS is essentially the same plug with that 2 additional prongs. I think just from a build perspective, it's easier to.
Oh yeah, because the CHAdeMO connector is huge.
Yep.
It's gigantic.
Yeah.
I remember
and you have a whole different plug as well. Like the Nissan Leaf would have 2 separate plugs on the front. So.
The CHAdeMO adapter that they sold for Tesla owners was gigantic. But yeah, like for most everybody else, you can make any EV work. The average daily commute is something like 30 miles back and forth.
That's a far commute too.
Yeah.
Most people I know don't even commute that far.
I mean, I drive to West Seattle and it's like, I think 14 miles each way.
Yeah, so technically you would need a EV that has 60 miles of range to be very comfortable with like AC going on.
In weather, especially in the winter too. Yeah. But I mean, what EV does not have 60 miles of range right now?
Exactly.
Nothing you buy.
Even like a Nissan Leaf, with like a cold battery can still do that too.
Because they bumped, what's the range on the Leaf these days? They bumped it up to like 150, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Somewhere around there.
200-ish.
That's totally doable.
But the infrastructure issue is going to be like the main bottleneck, so to speak, right? So our director Andrew, he came and visited me a couple months ago from Spokane. He bought the new Hyundai Kona Electric, and I believe that has an EPA rating of about 260 miles, which actually is very accurate. He averaged a little bit more than the advertised, I guess the average highway speed to get those EPA numbers.
Because that's always the problem, right? Like, a lot of EVs are super unpredictable about their range.
It's done at like 65 miles an hour, so if you do 70, immediately your range plummets and whatnot. So he actually got around that 260-ish miles range that was advertised. But, he decided to stop at one of the fast charging stations. And it's not even that fast on the Kona. I believe he said that it tops out at around 75 kilowatts, which is like okay for DC charging. Nowhere close to supercharging.
Put that into miles. How many miles per hour?
If
he sits there for an hour at 75 kilowatts.
Oh, it was supposed to be easily a full charge because it's a relatively small battery.
Okay, so 15 minutes. 75 at 15 minutes.
Well, the idea was that he was going to eat lunch and then he would have enough range to continue driving because he had to plan it out so that when he got to that DC charging station, he was basically on empty.
Yeah.
The problem is he got there, he plugged it in, it said that it was working, he started eating, and then he didn't realize that it actually had stopped charging. The charger had stopped working. So he comes out from his lunch thinking he had a full charge, but he didn't. And so now he had to wait an additional amount of time before he can set off again because he had planned it in such a way that he was going to be essentially empty by the time he got there. And the problem is, the reason why he didn't get notified is because as far as, I forgot how it worked out, as far as the car was concerned, it was still connected. So it didn't notify him that it got disconnected.
Yep.
But on the charger end, it had aired out and had stopped providing charge. So he didn't get a notification to go check on his car or anything there. And that's the problem when like a full charge, doesn't take 2 minutes like gasoline, right? It's going to take 20 minutes. You anticipated that it was going to be done in 20. And it didn't. It kind of sucks from a payment perspective. And I believe that was 2 of 4 chargers weren't working at that charging station too.
Gross.
Right? So like, even though you have to take an extra amount of time, now you have to make sure that like other chargers are going to be working too.
Yep.
And if you have 1 mile of range left, your options are kind of limited where you charge.
I've pulled in. I've cut it close in a Tesla before. I pulled in at 0 miles, and it is terrifying because Yeah, you're pulling up. Is this charger gonna work? Am I gonna make it? Like, am I about to be dead on the road? Like, what's happening here?
It's a little bit different than a gas car too, because with a traditional gas car, you can kind of feel out when like, oh, it's kind of getting a little weak here. With electric car, you just don't know. When it goes, right? So, yeah. So I think the charging network is going to be a big thing. That's actually one of the reasons why the Volkswagen ID4 is having some issues, because even though Volkswagen is funding the Electrify America charging network, I believe the ID4 actually has. It's a lot of wind. I believe the ID4 actually has issues charging on Electrify America. They've been having yeah, for whatever reason, which is crazy because Volkswagen funds the thing. I believe people even have said that the Mustang Mach-E has less issues charging on Volkswagen's charging network than Volkswagen's on EV. But so that's another thing, right? Charging is a big thing, right? How do you standardize that, right? You got Teslas that use it's like the iPhone of charging, for EVs in America, anyways.
I want to say this for any manufacturer executive who's watching Clutch Kick right now.
The one person now.
You had the chance. Tesla made the supercharger network open for everybody. That was an option from the very beginning, and y'all chose not to.
Yep.
Like you could have a built-in network of superchargers that work across the entire country, maintained by Tesla, and you would have had to pay a nominal fee, and suddenly all of your EVs are competitive. And I'm not sitting here recommending a Tesla over any EV that you make.
Yeah,
you missed out.
Some of the argument was that other manufacturers aren't making batteries that can supercharge. But whether they can fully utilize it or not, the fact that if it can plug into the same plugs, that'd be really nice.
Yeah. Well, the superchargers dial it up and down depending on all sorts of factors. Like the car, I don't know the exact way that the system works, but it does. There is like a handshake that goes on between the car and the charger, and it tells it how much power to deliver and like what the temperature of everything is. And I know that it's tracking all of that stuff. So I feel like that wouldn't be too hard to integrate because it is just integrating to a single system.
Yeah. So the charging network is definitely a concern. Where do you think though, from like a, I guess, more philosophical perspective, like where do electric vehicles stand with like car enthusiasts like us, right? Because I have plenty of friends that, they've never experienced like the acceleration of electric vehicles, so it's very easy for them to say, oh, well, it's just a really soulless thing, right? Like who cares if you're faster, right? I love the sound of my V8 and stuff. Like where do you stand? How do you feel about that?
Man, it's so frustrating because on the one hand, absolutely. Nothing sounds as good as like a V8, like a flat plane V8. Like, oh my God!
All right, AMG boy. Yep.
It sounds amazing, and there is not an EV on the road that sounds anything like that. And honestly, I don't know that there ever will be. I might date myself in however many years, but as of right now, there's nothing that comes close to that. But the actual experience of driving an EV is, at least from the ones that I've driven, which I've driven an i3,
Great car.
I've driven all of the Teslas, except, actually no, I drove the old school Roadster, obviously not the new Roadster, and I haven't driven a Y yet.
I've heard it's garbage, so I wouldn't worry about that.
I've heard it's soulless garbage. I've driven the NSX in the plug-in mode, the EV mode.
Yeah.
But like to anybody who says that they're soulless, you haven't driven one. The violence on acceleration is breathtaking, and that I think is a personality all its own.
Yeah.
They tend to have really neutral handling characteristics because that low center of gravity. Like it's not like BMW where it's very balanced and like cool, you can get a little oversteer easily. Yep. It doesn't have that kind of character.
It's just good.
It's just
handle
good.
Well.
Yeah.
Not like amazing, but just well.
Yeah. And I think once the gearheads and all the performance nuts get in and really drive them, I don't know that there's any going back. Like the P100D in ludicrous mode kind of ruined everything else for me. It took the NSX for me to feel anything that came close to that in terms of that same like pull and acceleration. I remember I drove the AMG GT, which sounds unbelievable. But when you get on it, like it's not the same. It's not nearly as violent as the Tesla. It's not nearly. It doesn't feel half as quick. It's probably about as fast.
Oh, well, I think some like those hybrid supercars can get like the initial violence of an electric car, kind of. But as soon as it changes gears, like that violence goes away. Whereas Tesla has that violence all the way up till when it starts tapering off, which is hilarious. So imagine doing 0 to 80 with that same like ferocity of that initial punch when you step on the throttle. And to everyone that says it's joyless, you may say it's joyless, but I don't know if I ever took anyone out on a test drive when I was working at Tesla, and they would drive it and they thought it was the most exciting car in the world, and I would drive it and scare the crap out of them.
Oh yeah.
Don't ever tell me that they weren't having a good time. Car enthusiasts or not, I worked with people that came from like Ferraris and Lamborghinis and stuff like that, and it's a different type of joy.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's not binary. It's just not one way to have fun in a car, and it doesn't have the sound, but there's just something exciting about that smooth, silent acceleration. I think it's actually funnier when it's quiet because it's like this is not possible for you to be moving this way.
What I will say is I actually have a little bit of concern around EVs in that it's almost making performance too accessible for people.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
when a cheap car can do zero, because the i3, I believe, is still the fastest car BMW sells, 0 to 30.
Yes.
So when you've gone and you've made that kind of performance and acceleration cheap and accessible to people, you get the Mustang syndrome, where Mustangs are hunting down pedestrians in the streets and getting sideways, all of that. And so like you're putting this power in the hands of people who really don't know what they're doing with it. And on the flip side of that, I think at the very high end of it, I think we've already reached a point where the performance ceiling of a lot of high-end cars is realistically higher than what most any human driver can get out of it. Like the P1, the McLaren P1 is a great example of this, where technically it's the fastest of the holy trinity of hypercars, but it's also far and away the hardest to drive.
Most drivers can't actually make it faster than 918, and actually they proved that on the Grand Tour. They had like an okay level F1 driver, and then the P1 I believe was actually the slowest, even though on paper it could be the fastest. And with a good driver it would be.
And I think about like the Rimac?
The Rimac, yes.
Yeah, when Hammond rolled that down a hill. Hammond is a very capable driver.
Wow.
And he is. Like, let's be real here. He's up in, like, if you look at all the drivers in the world, he's in, like, the 90th, 95th percentile of them. He's not like an F1 driver.
He's just the worst Top Gear presenter.
Well, yeah, you're not wrong. But, like, a car like that, it has the performance ceiling on that is so high that, like, it tried to kill him. And I think we're going to get to a point where, like, the supercars, like the new Tesla Roadster, the one that's at some point in the future going to come out, who knows when, those are terrifying numbers. And the idea of some rich national, being granted that car while they're in college or whatever, because that stuff happens. And the Roadster is...
And you're missing 3/4 of the steering wheel.
And you're missing 3/4 of the steering wheel, the stupid yoke.
Oh, sorry, a quarter. But yeah, it's just...
But like, man,
that's a very interesting point.
It's terrifying. That kind of power on the streets is
it's not
frightening.
just the P100D. I believe like even the standard Tesla, they're plenty quick cars too, right? Like the base Model S is like like an S5 BMW M550i quick, which aren't slow cars. Like
0 to 60 in 4.3, 4.2, I think.
Yeah,
these
low
days.
fours. That's not something to laugh. That's a quick car, regardless of a plaid badge or not. So you're right. I mean, it's just that's why like Tesla accents are so famous, because like it's faster than what most people are used to, and it's also quiet, so you don't have that sensation of speed that you're normally used to.
It's lucky for all of us that they're forgiving. Like to their credit, the all-wheel drive on those is nothing short of astounding. And
I have gone full throttle in the rain like it is today on like an on-ramp, and then in like a P90D, and it corrected itself before I even had time to lift off. So
I drove I remember I was in Colorado doing a road trip for Tesla in a P80, I think it was a P85D with insane mode. And for some reason, it had summer tires on it.
Of course.
And I was driving through a blizzard in Colorado on like kind of worn out summer tires. And honestly, it handled it better than I had any reason to expect that it would. I was blown away by that experience. And that sold me on electric cars for all-wheel drive too.
It's that traction control that can make corrections
so much quicker.
Yeah.
And so, there are good and bad sides to it. The performance aspect kind of worries me. But, I don't know. Getting back to the original question, to the gearheads who downplay the performance or downplay the soul of it, you have to drive one. Because, I keep coming back to that word, but the violence of it. Another good one. I had a coworker who, on a test drive, I think this was before Ludicrous. I think it was still back when the insane mode was still the fastest Tesla, 0 to 60 in 3.1, I believe it was. She was looking at the driver of the car. He punched it. She got knocked back, and she had whiplash in her neck.
I had that same story. One of my coworkers, when he was teaching me, when I was first starting at Tesla, he was on a test drive and he was checking for a customer, you know, like the intersection and whatnot, and the customer gunned it and he actually sprained his neck. He was on, Advil for the next 2 days.
Yeah, so violent.
It is violent. It's more than 1G, right? So it's faster than if you threw the car off a cliff.
Yeah.
Right, so.
So yeah, I mean, if you're concerned about performance and you're looking at EVs and everything, like just don't.
No,
don't
if
worry.
you're concerned from like a joy perspective, like it's a different type of joy, and it's okay to like it, guys. You can like both. I like my manual cars, but I also enjoy and respect the performance of an electric car brings. And it's a good thing too. We want more people to buy electric because what that means is there's more gasoline to go around.
I think what will end up happening is that, assuming that gas cars don't get completely outlawed, you'll see gas cars just become the performance models.
Okay.
Like, you know, they'll make their enthusiast cars with gasoline engines. Maybe they'll have the option, whatever.
Only the BMW M3 is the gas car. Maybe it's a hybrid, but literally every other car, the normal 3 Series, normal 5, that's an electric car now, right?
Yep. I can totally see that happening.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, I don't think it'll even be on like the M's, like the M3, M5. I think it's going to be very specific to enthusiast cars, like the BRZ, the Nissan Z, the Miata, because they don't want to have to try to share a platform, because that's been like the issue with a lot of EVs to this point, is that they're compromised. They build the EV into a body or a chassis that was built for a gasoline layout.
Yeah.
So I think what you'll end up happening is they'll do that in like very low volume. Like Mazda will bring back the rotary.
Yes. No, don't do that.
Make a rotary Miata or something like that, and that'll be the only gasoline car that they sell. Everything else will be EVs. That's kind of the way that I hope it goes.
You know, the other bottleneck too that we haven't touched on yet is actually dealerships. Tesla has the advantage of direct to consumer. My car may be damaged. I don't know. Hey, maybe they can total it and I don't have to sell this. Tesla has the advantage of direct to consumer, which means several things. They can control the pricing of the vehicle, right? And they can also control education of it as well, right? They can educate the customer on why EV is a better option for their lifestyle. Because the problem with a lot of these manufacturers, you know, when they have dealerships selling these cars, dealerships don't want to sell you an EV.
Yeah, you're not coming back for maintenance.
You're not coming back for maintenance. And so they're actually, you know, they're hoping that, you know, they can dissuade you, right? They want to, you know, misinform you so you just end up buying like your regular gasoline vehicle.
Yep.
So that's gonna be a big thing to solve as well. If these legacy manufacturers want to, you know, have any type of adoption of electric vehicles, is these dealerships are going to be holding them back as well. That's another thing to overcome.
Something interesting. I don't know if this is still the case, but I remember when, what is it, the Jag I-Pace? Is there the electric one, the I-Pace? I think it's the I-Pace.
Yes.
So the Jag...
And the E-Pace is the gasoline version of it.
Great job.
And the F-Pace is the full-size SUV.
Yep.
Yep.
Good job with the naming conventions, Jaguar. It makes perfect sense. Yep. It's totally legible and 100% understandable.
Yes.
Good work. But no, the I-Pace... I-Pace? Yeah, I-Pace. I-Pace.
Yeah.
Like Tesla's, it can be diagnosed remotely and it can receive software updates.
Yeah.
They have a contract with the dealerships, or they did when this came out,
okay,
that you had to go to the dealership to get those software updates. So the car had to be parked outside of a dealership to get the software updates, whereas like Tesla does the thing where you get your updates from home.
What's the reasoning for this?
They wanted to keep that relation. It was I believe it was a mandate by the dealers.
Oh.
Yeah, so like they wanted you to have to still come into for service.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still a thing, but I remember reading about that when it came out, or when the I-Pace was new, that was a whole thing.
So you have to be on like a dealership Wi-Fi hotspot to do the software update or something.
Maybe a location based. Yeah, I don't know.
Huh. That's gonna be trouble as well. I don't know. I can't remember what the rule is in the U.S. So in terms of dealerships, I think manufacturers are required to have dealerships, right? That's why Tesla is in hot water in some states. It's
state by state.
Okay.
Some states have laws that prevent you from selling directly. Some states have laws that mandate dealerships. It varies. You know, it's a hodgepodge of laws, and that's been some of the challenge to this too. Like, you know, Tesla's trying to build a factory in Texas right now, and they can't sell in Texas. So
Well, the irony is that they can't sell in Texas, and yet their headquarters is moving to Texas. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so. Wow.
Yeah, that whole thing is bad. The dealer network is going to be, I think, so problematic for this. But it's also really interesting because, like, what's going to happen with the EVs? The dealers kind of have to, either they're going to mark up the prices on these EVs by a tremendous amount, or they're going to die.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
Majority
most of their money is in service.
Yep.
Yeah. Or like the finance contracts and stuff like that is a good chunk of it as well. But
God.
mostly it's just service on the vehicles.
Yeah.
So it's such a challenging situation, and like the dealer model is so built in and so established at this point. Like, what do you do if you're Ford or GM or whoever is trying to move the needle on that at this point?
Yeah.
It's just hard.
Yeah. As a light segue to a potential next episode as well, you know, this issue with dealership doesn't just stop with EVs. It also stops companies trying to move forward and upmarket their brand. So we get stories of, you know, people that genuinely are interested in buying things like a Kia Stinger or like a Genesis car, right? And the problem is those are still run by the traditional Kia or Hyundai dealerships who are not used to selling you a $60,000 car. So they're trying to use their, you know, tactics on selling like a $15,000 car to try to like force you into buying a car and whatnot. And it's just really ruining the customer experience and making people not buy a car which they otherwise would have wanted in the first place. And they're literally stopped by customer satisfaction.
Yeah, the fact that I
really
can build a Nissan Z, I keep going back to the Nissan Z, that's on the brain apparently. But the fact that I can build a car on, you know, whatever manufacturer's website and kind of come up to a certain price and then walk in and pay $10,000 over that price.
Yep.
There was a story in the news the other day actually where this guy in
The Bronco?
Yes, the Bronco. Yeah, they marked it up like $10,000 or $15,000
on a custom order, and he had no choice, but he negotiated it. But you know, the custom order Bronco, it finally arrived. So not easy cars to get right now, custom or not. And they're like, oh, just kidding, it's $10,000, and they're legally allowed to do stuff like that
because he had an order form that he had signed that the dealership had not signed.
Okay.
That was the crux of the issue. He had a photocopy of this signed agreement.
Well, I'm sure dealerships can also decline to sell you a car at any given time up until like everything's finalized too, right? Technically.
I don't know if there's a signed purchase agreement for that. You know, it's a custom order, and I know that the car is not there yet. But if there's a signed agreement and it's signed by both parties, I'm pretty sure that's legally binding. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
But you know, that seems about as cut and dry as it gets.
Interesting. Yeah, but I mean, luckily that person really wants this Bronco. But imagine someone that's kind of like on the fence about it. Like, there might be enough to be like, no, I'm not gonna pay $10,000 over a car that we agreed to buy at
cool. I guess I'm gonna go to Jeep and buy a Wrangler instead of the Bronco. Screw you, Ford.